planning an RV trip can be really stressful. Whether you are new to planning RV trips across the country or you've been doing this for a while, but you kind of want to see how everybody else does it, and maybe there's an easier way out there, I am going to walk you through how I use RV Life Trip Wizard, which is both an online and app-based software. This is going to make it a lot easier for you to know where you're going to stay, have everything lined up, know what to expect on your driving days, and have a smooth, peaceful journey. Before I go any further, this is not a sponsored video. This is sharing with y'all what I use. I don't have a promo code or any sort of link for you. I just want to share with you how I do things, and maybe it'll help. So before I get started with RV Life Trip Wizard, I want to explain to you the difference between RV Life Pro and RV Life Trip Wizard. Trip Wizard is a part of the suite of products that you get access to if you have RV Life Pro. Basically, you don't buy a subscription to RV Life Trip Wizard. You buy a subscription to RV Life Pro and you gain access to RV Life Trip Wizard. That is honestly the only product of these that I use regularly. But if you're going to pay for a service, you should know what's there. So as a part of RV Life Pro, you have the RV Life app, which is RV Safe GPS. You have the Trip Wizard, which is the planning suite. You have the Campground reviews. The Campground reviews are integrated into the trip planning, and I do use those heavily, but mostly only as a part of Trip Wizard. You also have Maintenance Tracker. I should be using this. There's no excuse for me not to be using this. You also have access to RV Life Masterclass and RV Life Communities, both of which I have not really used. Your mileage may vary. If they're useful to you, that's excellent. If they're not, y'all have the YouTubes. You don't need to pay for a masterclass. Anything you can find here, I guarantee you can find for free on YouTube. So, understanding that RV Life Trip Wizard is a part of RV Life Pro and gives you access to all of the tools within the RV Life suite, it is $65 a year. It makes everything so much easier. In my opinion, it's totally worth $65 a year. I am going to hit member login because I have already paid for a subscription and I do have login information, email required, password required. In the top right corner, I'm going to click on the little face icon. It will show your name next to the face icon and give you a drop down, which is very useful. Set your default settings. The general isn't really going to matter too much. Map resolution, units, you're probably going to use Imperial if you're in the States. RV info. This is where actually paying attention to settings is important. You can look up your RV info. For us, we have a 2022 Thor Freedom Elite, and it's 22 AG. So automatically input, bam, GG easy. We are carrying propane. We're taking regular fuel, 20-gallon tank. That's not right. We have a 50-gallon tank. I don't know if we have a reserve or not, so I'm just going to put the one. I'm sure it's more than that. Fuel economy, unfortunately, 9's kind of accurate. We're going to put 9.4 because I think that's what we get most often. Routing and driving. I don't avoid tolls because for me, it's worth paying $5 if we're cutting 45 minutes off of a 7-hour day. Avoid highways, avoid ferries, tunnels, unpaved roads. Usually do that. Now, driving estimate. This will make a lot more sense when we actually open up our map and start planning our route. I like to use the advanced driving radius. This creates a squiggly little outline that shows me roughly how long it'll take to get to what point on the map. One of the things that I've learned with RV driving is you can only do so much and you can only go so fast. It's not fun to drive our RV over 70 miles an hour. So we typically hit a top limit of 65, which means we take forever to get places. For some reference, we typically drive no more than 7 hours a day per the map directions. It's a lot more comfortable if we keep that to 6 because usually a 6 or 7 hour driving day will turn into at least 7 to 8.5 between our stops, going slowly in our RV, and all the variety of other shenanigans that happen on a trip that long. And then usually once or twice throughout the week, we'll drive 2 to 4 hours. Figure out what works for you and don't be afraid to find your pattern and stick to it. Do what works for you. So if I set it to 3 average hours a day, that gives me a really good scale to start from when I look at the map. Also, this provides expenses. I usually have this set at $20 a night for camping, which is really low. We kind of eat the same thing whether we're at home or on the road. So meals that's just groceries. Groceries doesn't change whether we're at home or on the road. I keep miscellaneous at 0, and then I have average cost per gallon at about $3.25. It is what it is. Now that we've got all that boring housekeeping out of the way, we are going to create our first trip. You'll hit the create trip button in the center of your screen, and you can also find this. I just tried to point at my screen for you. You can also find this in the top left corner in the navigation bar. So we're going to create a trip. We're going to call it Texas Ren Fair because I want to go to the Texas Ren Fair this year. Typically, we only have specific dates to arrive somewhere because we're usually either visiting family or going to a specific type of event. We can usually sort of just leave whenever's appropriate. As you're planning your trip, start with the important things that are set in stone and be flexible with what you can be flexible with. So for instance, if I know that I want to be at the Texas Ren Fair the last weekend of June, I don't know what day I'm leaving. We'll figure that out once we've planned our trip. We know how long it's going to take to get there. Then we can work backwards with the actual scheduling dates. So instead of worrying about dates at all at first, I'm just going to say, I don't know when I'm leaving. You can use your current location as a starting point. You can also search for a location or park to start, or set your own custom location on the map. What I usually do is I pick a park that's near our home just for ease of use. In this case, I'm going to say that we're going to start in Johnson City, Tennessee. Okay, our trip already has the default trip settings that we just looked at. You can change these here. It's not set in stone, but we're going to keep our defaults. And now, guys, it started us in Johnson City, Texas. Well, that's not okay. That's okay. Because sometimes you don't start where you think you're going to start. The number one rule about RV trip planning is things change. That's fine. So what we are going to do is we're going to come over here to Johnson City. There we go, Johnson City. Here's a campground right in Johnson City. I'm going to add this to my trip. I'm going to add it after the last stop, 0 nights, because we're not actually going to be there. We're going to add a trip. Now, delete that first one that's in Texas. And our trip's starting from Johnson City. Would you look at that? So what we have here is a squiggly lined map that shows how far you can get from your starting point in about 3 hours of driving. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to add my end point. We're going to search for a location or park. Okay, Texas Renaissance Festival. Look at that. Add a trip. I typically only use the lock after I have booked the park. We're going to be at the Texas Renaissance Festival we're going to lock the date of stay, and it's going to be the last weekend. We're going to be there from Thursday, give us a chance to rest, and we're going to leave Monday. I'm going to lock that just because that's not a campsite. That's actually when we're going to be there. What we're going to do is we're going to retro engineer this whole trip. And again, this is how I plan trips based on being a certain place at a certain time. If you want to do this the opposite way and move from your departure, that's fine too. Figure out what kind of planning style works for you and then go with it. So if we are arriving at our destination on a Thursday, I am not going to want to drive more than 2 to 4 hours that day because that's going to be a work day. I'm aiming for just inside or just outside this little green squiggle. For our map settings, the map style is just your personal preference. The driving radius is what we already set up in our default values. The layers are what's going to make this either much, much easier or much, much more difficult. I want to show campgrounds. I do not want to show POIs. You can use the research tab here on the right to decide what sort of POIs you want displayed on the map. The major types are fuel, parking, rest areas, and dump station, but you can also specify what you're looking for, whether it's casino with campground, any sort of area attractions. If these are valuable things for you to have information on during the course of your trip, toggle them on. In your research tab, you can also toggle the low clearance hazard. And if you have campgrounds toggled on, you can also see them in a list view in the research tab here. The filters is what really sets this planning software apart from looking at a map, using location services, an Excel sheet, Google Maps, all of these tools together. Because I don't care about campgrounds that don't allow pets. I don't want to see them. They don't matter to me. For instance, if you have a big rig, a Super C, or a huge Class A, if you only want to pull through, if you're looking for Class A only, kid-friendly, these are things that can be really important to you as you're planning your trip. So utilize these filter functions so that you don't have to go through and sort them out, and also so that you're not disappointed when you accidentally missed something. You can also filter by hookups and connectivity if you're only looking for full hookup, if you're only looking for Wi-Fi, etc. You can filter by more amenities, restrooms, pet area. You can filter by pricing. I don't recommend this because the pricing isn't always reliable. And then, if you've got kids, you're looking for something with a pool. If you're a boater, if you're a golf player, you can look at things like this. There's also an option for brands, clubs, and memberships. If you're affiliated with any of those, this is a good way to pare down into the things that are going to save you money. With our filter on, the only things that really matter to us is that pets are allowed. We are going to close that research tab. If we zoom out, look at the big picture, and get rid of campgrounds so we clear up the map a little bit, you can see that it has already created us the shortest and fastest route from our starting point to our end point. For this trip, let's say that we want to get there kind of as fast as we can. I'm going to try to follow this suggested route as well as I can. I would typically say that if you aren't familiar with the route and you don't have any campgrounds that you really want to stop at because you know you love them, follow the suggested route as well as you can the first time. If you realize that the options you have on that route just aren't going to cut it, then see where and how you can adapt it. But for now, and how I'd typically start figuring out a plan like this, is I would start following this path as well as I could. If my goal is 2 to 3 hours, this one is just outside 2 hours. The way that I vet whether or not I'd consider staying at a park is the very first thing I do is pop up park details. This is where the RV Life Campground sort of melds into RV Life Trip Wizard, because this overview and reviews is all a part of RV Life Campgrounds. The very first thing that I'm going to check is I'm going to look at the features. I'm going to make sure that pets are allowed for sure. And then I'm also going to look at the connectivity options. A lot of parks have Wi-Fi. We almost never use park Wi-Fi. My partner and I are both software engineers. We're also both gamers, and a lot of our friends we're connected to digitally, which means that it is very important for us to have internet access at all times. That being said, we have our phones on a Verizon plan, which can also run off the Sprint network if we're roaming, and we have a T-Mobile home internet hotspot with a WeBoost permanently mounted on our RV roof. So that means that we usually don't need park Wi-Fi, because if a park has Wi-Fi, we're going to have better internet than that park does. So that being said, especially if we're going to be there during a work day, I need to make sure that we have some level of connectivity. And if this park offers Wi-Fi and also has Verizon and T-Mobile connectivity, that should be good from this front. And again, this is just my personal process here. The next thing that I'm going to check is the price. It has a rating of 2 out of 4 dollar signs. I'm going to go ahead and open this up in a new tab, and I'm going to check for what the pricing options are. While I'm on this park's website, I'm going to make sure that they are open the period of time I want to travel there. Usually in the South, this isn't too much of a problem, but as you go further north, the campgrounds close over the winter. You want to make sure before you plan your trip around this stop, you want to make sure that it has all the amenities you need, it's within your personal price range, and it's going to be open and have availability the time period you want to travel through. Once all those things are squared away, I'm going to look at the reviews within TripWizard. I have found that these reviews are almost universally accurate. Y'all, when I say listen to these reviews, okay? We stayed at exactly one campground that had really bad reviews, and it's because it was in a part of Utah that was just completely empty, and I was like, you know what? It'll be fine. It can't be that bad. It was that bad. We pull up to this campground. No one's there. So there's a little book that has some sites blocked. My name wasn't in any of the sites, even though I'd booked. So I was like, okay, I guess I get to pick my own site. So I pick a site, and we get everything hooked up, and the power doesn't work at all. So we move to another site, and we realize that it's not that the power doesn't work, it's that the power blew our surge protector. I call a number, somebody acts really sassy with me, tells me to just plug it in anyway. Knowing what I know now, I would never. Y'all, never plug your RV in without a surge protector. But the power situation was fine. Their faucets dripped all night. And you know what doesn't do any good if the faucet's dripping all night? A heated hose or heat tape on the faucet. A huge shell of ice froze over the whole entire spigot. I couldn't make coffee because I didn't have water. We ended up leaving. It was pitch black. We left at some 6 a.m. just to get out of there and go to a gas station and get coffee. Never again. Use the reviews. Look at your reviews and look at your tips in QA. There's a lot of good advice here. For instance, 5 miles from shopping and restaurants. Mosquito problem at night. Make reservations, not good for tents. If you have a large rig, pick one of the pull-through sites that are at an angle. Some are 90 degrees to the entry road. This is actual useful advice. These are things that you're not going to find on the park website, but you do have access to if you have the RV Life Pro membership. This looks great. We are going to add it to our trip. If we arrive on a Thursday, I'm probably not going to drive again that week. So I'm going to stay here from Sunday to Thursday. So 4 nights here. And we're going to add this stop after our starting point. It fits in. It'll make sense. We're going to add this to our trip. So now if we zoom all the way out, we have our starting point, we have a stop, and we have our ending point. And our driving distance from Sam Houston to our end point is 3 hours, 20 minutes, which is perfect. That's exactly the kind of drive I want on a Thursday. So from here, we are going to select this stop as our main stop. We're going to zoom out, and you can see that our squiggly little outline has moved. Because we're going to be arriving to this place on a Sunday night, that means that this day of driving is a Sunday day, which means it's going to be longer. I'm going to go about twice as far as the squiggly line recommends. So let me show my campgrounds again. And I'm going to aim for, let's pull up something like this. Before I put time into looking at this specific park, I'm going to go ahead and add it to the trip. By adding it to my trip tentatively, this gives me the drive distance from this campsite to the next stop. And that's going to be a 6 hour and 20 minute drive to Sam Houston. That is perfectly fine for me on a Sunday. So that means that I can look at campgrounds in this general area, and that's going to work for me and my driving schedule. You see where I'm going with this? So we're going to go ahead and get rid of this because I don't know if this is actually a park that I want. But now we're going to look at this park because it's in a decent place. Immediately, it has dogs, it's cheap, it says it doesn't have Wi-Fi, but I'm going to pop my park details up. I'm going to look at features, and even though we're not sure if it has Wi-Fi, it has Verizon and it has AT&T. So that's going to be okay for me from a connectivity standpoint. There's also pets allowed. That's fine. We're going to pop up the website. Just like I showed you, we're going to look at the website for pricing, for availability, and for the campground actually being open. Once we decide those things are acceptable, we're going to look at these reviews and make sure that none of them say something like, the electricity system blew my whole RV up, don't stay here ever. We're going to look at the tips in QA to make sure that there's, nothing that stands out that says this is a problem. Like, the area around the park is a bit seedy and very limited services. If this is a problem for you, now you know. If this is not a problem for you, you've got a heads up. You know that maybe I should stop and get gas before I get there. Maybe I'm not going to be able to run out to the Stop and Rob for a 6-pack and some ice. This is good information to have as you're trip planning. Once we've decided this is going to fit in our schedule, we're going to add this to the trip. This is the place that we're staying before our long Sunday drive, which means that we're only going to spend one night here, Saturday to Sunday. Another thing to be careful for as you're planning these trips, there are campgrounds that don't allow single night stays. Your options with those are either to plan around to stay longer or to just pay 2 nights and eat the cost. There's pros and cons to either of those, but just be aware that that's something you've got to look out for, especially if you're looking at really popular parks in really popular places on really popular weekends. So assuming that this park has availability, it allows us to book one night, we're going to go ahead and add that to the trip. This is further than we'd normally drive 2 days in a row, but it's an example. So now that I have the whole trip planned, I'm going to adjust my dates. If I want to arrive at the Ren Fair on Thursday and spend 4 nights here and 1 night, that means that I need to adjust my leaving date to be Saturday the 22nd. Depending on how long your trip is and how far you're comfortable driving each day, this process might go on for several hours as you book campsites all the way across the country. And that's okay. The beautiful thing about this planning software is that you can save it and pick it back up at any other point. I would not recommend booking any campgrounds until you have a full leg of your trip planned. So whether that is going to be 3 stops in a 1-week trip or 15 stops in a 3-week trip or any combination of time and distance, I would make sure that each puzzle piece falls into place before you glue it down. And that's how I use the lock function for these dates. For instance, I would open up both of these campgrounds websites, and then I would book the first one, lock the trip stop when I have those specific dates, and I know what nights I have paid for and I have guaranteed accommodations. I'd move to the next one. I'd open up this website. As soon as I've paid for those specific dates, I would lock it into place. And so there you have it. This is how I plan trips. It's what has worked for me. Now, that being said, there are so many ways to approach this. There's other tools, there's other softwares. This might work for you. There might also be something that works better. So please feel free to let me know in the comments what your preferred method is. If you've done it before, if you liked TripWizard, if there's something maybe there's something better out there. This is kind of what I picked up when I first started traveling, and it was good enough that I never left it. Some other features that you should know about here is there's also the ability to open a trip. This means that if you have past trips that you really enjoyed, if you want to check, where was that campground? I really liked it. You can look at your archived trips and reference them. You can also create as many trips as you want. Typically, I'll create a trip for each major leg. So if we're going to Texas and we're staying a week with family there, not at a campground, I'll create a different trip for going and then returning. Same with our big trips to Washington State, things like that. But again, there's round trip options. You can do what works best for you. I really hope that this video has been helpful to y'all. It is not the type of video that I planned on making when I was like, I'm going to do RV vlogging. But I think there's a lot of value in sharing experiences, sharing methods, sharing the parts of RVing that aren't glamorous. It's not all sunsets and lakes. Sometimes it's sitting at your desktop PC for 4 hours, mapping and remapping and mapping and remapping until you have everything squared away. So just remember that it's all going to be worth it at the end. Do what you need to do to get yourself on the road safely, having a good time, and I'll see you in our next adventure.